Welcome to the OK, Let's Learn podcast. This is where you get two podcasts in one, where we read great books and go through great stories in our OK Book Club, and we learn about tons of different topics and people. So today, OK, let's learn about the Battle of New Orleans, the fifth in a series of episodes on the War of 1812. I would definitely encourage you to go back and listen to the first episode on the year 1811, which was everything that led up to the War of 1812, all of its causes. Then we go into James Madison and Dolly Madison, all interesting information on our president during this time and his amazing wife. Then we head into the burning of Washington, D.C., the horrible day, August 24th, 1814, when our capital was burned down to the ground. And then just after that, we had the Battle of Baltimore, the defense of Fort McHenry, where the Star-Spangled Banner was written that night. And now, the Battle of New Orleans, which was so important and had a lasting impact on the history of our country, but it should never have even started. Now, I will say, as we begin, each of these episodes you can listen on their own, but to get the full impact of the entire war, obviously listening to each of them is preferable. Now, New Orleans, as you know, still around today. Back then, hugely important port at the mouth of the Mississippi River, heading into the Gulf of Mexico. You had the ability to ship goods up and down this river. And yes, even going upstream. You see, back then, there weren't highways, there weren't trains. America was nothing but just back roads, dirt roads, muddy roads, but there was a road, and it was a giant river, the Mississippi River. One of the reasons it was so long, so huge, is that you had little fingers basically joining the river all along its long trip south. You had the Ohio River, the Tennessee River, the Missouri River, the Cumberland River, all pouring into it. Together, they all carried food, animals, tools, people across the country. And yes, at the bottom of this river, like I said, sat New Orleans. Whoever controlled New Orleans controlled the Mississippi River. Whoever controlled the Mississippi River controlled the United States of America. This was so important to our future plans, our expansion out west, but most of all, with a three-pronged strategy of controlling the Northeast through New York, controlling the port cities along the East Coast. And now, if you controlled the Mississippi River, it's like you were squeezing the Americans. We would be surrounded. We would not be able to control our movement at all. Our flow of goods, our flow of the economy, our ability to survive as a nation. It's almost as if we were being choked. Now, as we talk about controlling the Mississippi River, just a year before the war started, in year 1811, the first steamboat traveled up the Mississippi River. So it's important to remember this. Traveling downstream for ages, right? Right up until this war began was simple. But traveling upstream, it was difficult. And yes, now as we're entering the war, this river became even more important than you could imagine because the flow of goods would be going north and south with the advent of the steamship. So here come the Redcoats. More than 8,000 British soldiers sailed towards Louisiana. Many were veterans who had fought with Napoleon over in Europe. They knew, they believed, and they thought that New Orleans would fall fast. But they didn't know what was waiting for them. Yes, there was a secret weapon. America needed someone. They needed someone to take charge that was not available and didn't help us with defending the Capitol. They chose a fellow by the name of Andrew Jackson. He wasn't aristocratic. He wasn't flashy. He just got jobs done. He grew up poor on the frontier. He fought in the American Revolution as a boy. He had been wounded, he was captured, he was starved, and through all this, he became a lawyer, then a general, and yes, a leader. People called him Old Hickory. Why? Because hickory wood is hard, tough, and unbreakable, and so was this man. When he arrived in New Orleans, he didn't see a peaceful city. He saw danger, and he got to work. You see, he just didn't get together regular soldiers. He got together everyone and anyone that he could get to defend this city, and he got to work quick. He had, yes, army troops, but he got together farmers, he got together free black soldiers, Native Americans, sailors, anybody and everyone, and yes, even pirates. Yes, pirates. They were huge in this battle. Here's how important they were. You see, all around New Orleans, there were swamps, there were waterways, there were little streams and rivers. And in this environment, there were two important privateers. Yes, they were privateers, but prior to this, they were actually pirates. Their names were Jean and Pierre Lafitte. They were part traders, like I said, but yes, they were pirates. They smuggled goods, and they knew the waterways back and forth like the back of their hand better than anyone. And at first, the Redcoats tried to bribe them. They tried to get them over on their side, and Lafitte said no. Instead, he warned Andrew Jackson. He helped Andrew Jackson. They didn't trust pirates, right? Anybody. Who would trust pirates? But what Lafitte offered Andrew Jackson was something powerful. Lots of ammunition, cannons, gunfire, and yes, skilled fighters who knew the back countries, all the escape routes, and all the entryways. They knew everything. So Andrew Jackson brought Lafitte brothers onto their side, and suddenly pirates became heroes. So, Andrew Jackson, he knew the British were on their way. And what he did was he chose a narrow strip of land near the Rodriguez Canal, just outside the city. On one side was the Mississippi River. On the other side was this huge swamp. He figured the Redcoats would be trapped all night long. 2 days. This was only 2 days prior to understanding that the Redcoats were on their way, that he got the defenses dug, literally dug. They piled dirt all night long. They stacked logs, and they built a wall that ultimately became known as Jackson's Wall. They called it Jackson's Line. Now, it's important to talk about the timeline here, the dates. Ultimately, it was around December 1st, 1814, when Jackson arrived in New Orleans. This is when he got to work, and right through the end of the year, Christmas, New Year's Day, into the first week of the new year of 1815, he launched surprise attacks on the British camps, so they slowed their progress and they were forcing them to face his prepared defenses. But ultimately, it was on Christmas Eve across the ocean that something else was happening that Jackson and the Redcoats had no clue about. You see, the United States had sent over to actually Belgium to negotiate with the British to end the war. Yes, when we had 5 important people, and one of them was John Quincy Adams, our future U.S. president, and Henry Clay, who at the time was the Speaker of the House of Representatives and was very famous in his own right. And it was Christmas Eve that they ultimately came to an understanding and an agreement called the Treaty of Ghent, where they said the war is over. But as you know, during this time across the ocean to get information back took a couple months. It took at least 4 to 5 weeks at best. And then to get over to Mississippi, it's one thing to get into Boston and the harbor of Boston, but the Mississippi, the Mississippi River in New Orleans, it was a little bit longer trip. So here they are attacking each other, another battle, and yes, the war was over. But it wasn't. So here we are on January 8th, 1815, 8,000 redcoats approaching the Rodriguez Canal just outside of New Orleans, 4,000 Americans. And they are dealing with a thick fog. The British, they stayed pat. They were ready. Their bayonets, the orders were ready. Their plan was about to be put into place. You see, it was bold. One group would charge the center. The other would attack the left flank. Why? Because there were American cannons and ammunition lined up literally on that side. They figured they would go in, capture the cannons, capture the artillery, capture the people over there on the left flank, and then come behind the Americans. Again, the pincer move, the trying to squeeze them. If it worked, everything would be over. The redcoats advanced. They fired. The assault was on. And yes, the fog was helping the redcoats. They moved closer and closer. And then, miraculously, suddenly, unbelievably, the fog lifted just as the redcoats were right on top of the Americans, and that's when everything turned the Americans' way. We fired back. They were sitting ducks. The pirates fired. The farmers fired. The free black regiment stood strong. The British, though, kept coming. But the ground was muddy. The canal was deep. And yes, one by one, the redcoats fell to the ground. And the general, the leader of the redcoats, a fellow by the name of Edward Pakenham, was wounded and then killed. And that left flank we talked about, we held them off. They didn't move any further. The cannon stealing mission over on the left flank had been defeated. And yes, everything stalled. And it lasted only a half an hour. 30 minutes. 8,000 Brits originally advanced. 2,000 passed away. We had 4,000. We had only 70 casualties. The numbers shocked the world. Andrew Jackson's defense had worked. The river was safe. The city was safe. And the United States of America was safe. It was a short time later that news did arrive that, yes, this battle was fought in vain, but it wasn't fought in vain. In fact, the victory at New Orleans changed everything. Andrew Jackson became a national hero. He became our future president. And people remembered the pirates who became patriots, the soldiers who held the line, the fog that lifted at the perfect moment. And it was a river that kept America connected. This small dirt wall, yes, only 7 feet high, that was near a canal, became one of the most important battlefields in United States history. A battle that shouldn't have been fought was fought. The war was over before the battle began, but yet it still became one of the most famous battles in United States history. So to wrap up our podcast, let's go through, number one, 5 interesting nuggets about the Battle of New Orleans, and then we'll wrap up what happened at the end to close the War of 1812. The British forgot their ladders. Number one, they had planned on literally carrying ladders up to cross the Rodriguez Canal and climb Jackson's Wall. But in the fog and confusion, the officer that was in charge of the ladders went the wrong way. The British reached the canal, but most of the soldiers had nothing to climb with. So instead of charging, the soldiers were stuck in front of the ditch, and the bullets end up raining down. Number 2, Andrew Jackson declared martial law, and he actually locked up a judge. Basically, martial law meant prior to the battle, no one could leave the city. Newspapers were controlled. Soldiers could even arrest civilians and regular people. A local judge didn't like it. He tried to stop Jackson. But Andrew Jackson had the judge arrested and jailed. After the war, the judge actually fined Andrew Jackson $1,000, but years later, Congress repaid Jackson back with interest. Some of the American cannons were stolen pirate guns. Yes, Jean Lafitte's men just didn't fight. They brought equipment, and these were smuggled cannons, pirate cannons. Number 4. The British camp was so wet that the gunpowder failed. They actually camped in the swamps that were near the city, as I talked about before, and there was rain and it soaked the grounds, and ultimately a lot of the gunpowder got damp, and because of this, the muskets misfired, the cannons fired late, and yes, Jackson's men were dry behind the wall. Yes, so much can affect an outcome of a battle, and this one was huge on our part. And finally, 5, it was so quick. It's absolutely amazing, but literally 30 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes tops, it was over. So here we are. The War of 1812 is now over. It didn't begin with just one problem. It began with many. The Brits stopped our ships. They impressed our sailors. They blocked trade. They armed the Native Americans to slow our expansion. And they treated us like a child instead of a country. We finally had said it was enough. So in 1812, we went to war for the second time against the greatest empire on earth. At first, we struggled. Everything was a stalemate. Then disasters. They burned down Washington, D.C., the president's house, the Capitol, everything. We stood tall. Fort McHenry, the bombs flew all night, yet the flag was still waving. And here we are now at New Orleans. Even though the war was over, we won a decisive battle. Our spirits went through the roof. And yes, we ended up standing tall. But here we are. Who won? No country gained territory. No country paid money. No country surrendered. It was a tie. It was a stalemate. The Britons, they didn't conquer us. We didn't conquer Canada. Each side walked away with their heads held high. And you know what? There's a deeper truth. Britain's goal was to control us. Our goal was respect. And that is what changed after the war. They said that the war ultimately accomplished nothing. And technically, yes, the agreement was everything would stand in place as it was before the war began. But the Brits, they stopped impressing our sailors. They literally started trading with us again. We proved that we could defend ourselves, and we felt united, really, for the first time since the end of the American Revolution. So this war really didn't make us bigger. It just made us stronger. And yes, coming out of this, there was a hero. His name was Andrew Jackson. He became down the road our 7th president of the United States. And listen, he's on the $20 bill. But his legacy is complicated. It's controversial because as much as he was a hero, he also owned slaves, and he literally forced the removal of Native Americans in what became known as the Trail of Tears. Clearly a complicated man, a man of the common people. He was against the aristocracy and the royalty, quote unquote, of American society, and definitely worthy of a future episode. But as we wrap up our podcast here, the War of 1812, what did it tell the world? That our nation here was now on the world stage. We're not temporary. And yeah, our flag is still flying. And this experiment called the United States of America is here to stay. Friends, thanks again for staying with me on this journey, wrapping up the War of 1812, talking about the Battle of New Orleans. Reach out to me at kevmok21@gmail.com. There's a link at the bottom of the description of this episode where you can reach out to me and text me ideas for future episodes, comments, feedback, anything. And yes, until next time, have fun and keep learning.